Hello, welcome to today's episode of the People Proud podcast from HiBob. Today, we're very excited to welcome Limor Raz, VP of People Foundations and Experience at HiBob. A little bit about her. She has a background in business consulting, and she's led large-scale organizational and systems transformations. Today, she's leading HiBob's People Foundations and Insights, Total Rewards, and Experience. What does she do in her everyday? She's bringing together people analytics, workforce planning, HR technology, and total rewards with employee experience. And she particularly focuses on connecting people and data and financial thinking, which is why we're here today. We're talking about building a shared language between HR and finance teams, which leads me to introducing Joe Garafalo. He is HiBob's general manager of our FP&A product line. He has a background in finance and accounting, and he's led finance teams for a decade before becoming a founder of an FP&A platform that helped bring financial workflows into the 21st century. Joe joined HiBob last April 2024 via acquisition and is now a part of HiBob's mission to unite HR and finance teams around the globe. If this is your first episode of the People Proud podcast from HiBob, I'm Tali Sachs, one of your co-hosts. I work on the content side of marketing. I write our blogs, our guides, a lot of HR tools, and I will let Ken, my co-host, introduce himself.
Thanks, Tali. I'm Ken Matos. I'm the Director of Market Insights here at HiBob. My focus is on leading our Insights Lab to understand what's going on in the world of HR and the evolving experience of work, and how do we make sure that we set up our customers and colleagues to manage that transformation smoothly and easily.
Amazing. We're really excited to welcome you both here, Joe and Limor. And for everybody listening and watching, a little bit about what to expect from today's episode. HR and finance. These two departments often speak completely different languages professionally, but ultimately they're working towards the very same goals. So we're bringing Limor from the HR side and Joe from the finance side together to talk about the future of workforce planning and financial forecasting. And we're going to talk about what needs to change and how to build shared understanding. And I think most importantly, why it's time to stop treating people and budgets like separate conversations. So with that, a little bit of an icebreaker here. So a lot of vocab words are triggering for HR or finance when they start talking to each other. And it leads to a lot of friction. So Limor and Joe, what have been your reactions to vocab words within your professions, like EBITDA or overhead or burn rate or bonus, equity refresh or total rewards, just over the course of your careers?
So I guess I can start. And when you say EBITDA, I'm really recalling, those initial discussions where these type of financial acronyms came up, and I was feeling very anxious about it. And my anxiousness was really coming from actually not even the gap between being an HR professional and now needing to know the financial language, but deeper than that, because I studied I studied design, and I thought that I'm like a very the human part of the skill set, and not numbers and analysis. And one of the things that I learned on myself during my professional experience is that you always surprise yourself how versatile and round you can be in actually when exploring new fields of knowledge, really identifying the broadness that you can find in yourself, in things that you find passion in and love. So I remember feeling anxious about those words, but today I feel proud that I can really translate to people, how these interconnect to people aspects and human capital aspects that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. And really that we should not be afraid, rather that this is a great opportunity to make a real impact by connecting those.
Thanks. Joe?
Very cool. So from my perspective, the word that kind of strikes a nerve for me was total rewards. So I started my career in the Big Four. KPMG came from a big financial institution. There were no total rewards, right? There was like a coffee machine that you had to pay for to get your coffee. And then in 2012, I joined my first startup, which was a company in the Bay Area called Palantir. And that was the first place I heard the word total rewards. And I was like, I don't know what that actually means. And then you dug a layer deeper, and Palantir was offering employees all these really, really cool perks or benefits, right? So they had somebody who would come on site to give haircuts. They had a laundry service for you. They provided free lunches. They had all of these really cool perks like gym memberships and cell phones. And they would always roll out these new perks, which were awesome. But from a finance perspective, it made my life like extremely difficult, because I was like, okay, wait, you're offering this for every employee? How the heck do I forecast this? How do I know which employees are going to use their laundry service every single day versus which are never going to use it? So while these perks were like really cool and the total rewards were amazing and you benefit so greatly, like it definitely took some of the predictability out of my ability to forecast, and always left me like kind of scared about, what the number is actually going to be, and was I forecasting it correctly? And the pace at which they were rolling them out, while it was great, like I loved it, it was scary from a forecasting perspective. But I've really learned to kind of embrace those total rewards as, a great way to attract talent. And I totally understand why companies have them, and I think they're really great.
I think you did a really great job, both of you, of outlining or illustrating how some of these terms cause anxiety and cause friction between, like, HR, the people, and finance, the numbers and fiscal people, and also as an employee yourself, like, well, I love the perks, but what am I supposed to do when it comes to forecasting? Um, and I want to talk a little bit about, like, that friction and how you've seen that play out throughout your career, and, like, when the conversations between HR teams and finance teams start to really break down, even when you're trying, or especially when you're trying to create or identify shared goals, and really what we can do to reframe that conversation. Like, what have you done throughout your careers to effectively reframe them and worked better together? Because you two are, like, I think you really epitomize how these two functions can work really well together, and understand that. And that's what we want to talk about and show our audience as best practice.
So I think first, have had a long career in finance, and I've seen what really good looks like, and I've also seen what I think poor looks like. And I think there's a big difference between the two. And just to take a step back first, I think when you asked about what words strike a nerve, I think two words that kind of strike a nerve are both HR and finance, right? I think people have a lot of connotations about what each of those teams actually does. And sometimes you could hear the word HR and you think, oh man, I'm in trouble. Like, I'm going to talk to the HR person at the company, or, you're having a meeting with the finance team to get ready because they're going to say no. And I think like those two connotations carry, a lot of weight with, the titles of HR and FP&A. But if you boil it down, what a really good HR and FP&A team actually does, they're a customer service org to the rest of the business. And they have all of these business partners, and they're trying to enable their business partners to get, on the HR side, it's capability and capacity, right? And on the finance side, it's the finance team should enable them to get what they need within, the best interest of the business to meet the budget and the goals. So if you kind of boil down FP&A and HR, they're both business partners. They should both be customer service organizations. But they should also be customer service organizations to one another. And I think if they operate interdependently and not together, that's where I think some of the breakdown can start to happen. So I think it's important that you treat your HR and finance team as a team together so that they can service the business. So that when you're making hiring plans or planning out total rewards, both HR and finance are on the same page so that then they could better serve the rest of the business. And when they're not, I think that's when things tend to break down.
I totally agree. I want to maybe reflect back on the really early stages that I remember, when it first hit me, this gap sort of between, the financial language and the HR language is on those QBRs that I took part in with management in my previous previous company that I worked at, and I remember those initial days where we gathered together, each came with their own dashboards and data points, and they didn't speak to one another, not at all. There was no one storyline. One came with these numbers, another one came with those numbers, obviously because one was driven from financial systems and one was driven from the HRIS. And I really I when I look back at the journey that we did, and it obviously connects very much to the whole data management journey as a whole, looking much more integratively and holistically at how you manage and you look at data for decision making. It's really about getting to the bits and bytes of how you define KPIs and where do you go to pick this data and how do you do, a proper mapping between this language and that language. And by the way, organizations that progress to a more sophisticated way to integrate those languages in terms of, for example, cost accounting and, looking at like a cost accounting catalog and creating this shared language between the two functions. I think going back to what you said, Joe, it's like for me, when I think about the software SaaS companies that we work at, the human capital is the asset, right? It's not a semiconductor. It's not the human capital is the main asset, the main cost of the company. And therefore the value of this integration between the finance and the HR, I think it's like there is still so much work to do there, because typically I would even say bluntly that HR people do not come with the skill set that is required for these type of things. I don't want to say anything about the finance people. I want to represent the place that I come from and the really sort of objective view that I have to the fact that I feel that there is like a mutual journey to do in terms of skill set, in order to build this true connection.
Did you find, like, obviously you've been through quite a journey from design to HR, very people side, and you have upskilled yourself. What was that journey like? And did you proactively reach out to financial peers to do that? And how? What was that experience like?
So, first, yes, I had a very versatile career, as you mentioned before, starting from business consulting. And I think I'm going back to that because I do think that this piece in my career, being in a place where I need to help organizations go through very big transformations, and knowing to listen to business challenges and find relevant solutions, whether it's with systems or processes. Okay, I think that this big, this step in the beginning of my career really equipped me to come into the HR space with a much broader view of, we're not only dealing with, how people feel better at their work, or, what can we provide to for fun and cheerful days, rather to really look at it from the business angle of it, like what does the leader need from me? Really going back to what Job said, at the end of the day, whether it's the CEO of the company or whether it's any other C-level or what have you, if we want to drive their accountability, right, to do things in a healthy way, in the right way, to drive growth and all of those, we must help them connect those dots. And so, to your question, a lot of what I've done is always ask questions, listen first to the business leaders. When I'm building something, I always try to do it in a co-design mode with the business, and not, in a standalone, tower that comes with some practice and assumes that it will then fit what the leaders need. So for me, these are like the anchors. Really, really, always trying to first understand, and by listening, what are the pains in the business, what do we need to serve, and then from that offer the right solutions, and usually it's the integrated ones.
Thanks. Great answer.
I'll touch on another point that Limor mentioned around KPIs, and I think it's difficult when different systems all have different sets of data. I think one of the things I'm most excited about at HiBob is the fact that we have a system that connects people plans to workforce plans to financial plans. So there is less of that data reconciliation, where I think a lot of times, if you try to go meet your HR partners and you're wasting time reconciling data from the financial model to, the ATS or the HRIS platform, then you're not really having a valuable meeting. And I think it's one thing to help the HR team get well versed on financial KPIs. I think what's actually more important is kind of understanding the people journey, right? So if you think about like a go-to-market function, when they're planning revenue, you have to plan for pipeline. That pipeline has to, be generated from the marketing team or the outbound team. You have to then warm up that pipeline through, sales calls, and you don't just say, okay, we're gonna hit 100 million in revenue next quarter. It takes time, and the go-to-market team plans that. I think that same flow has to happen with people as well, right? So I think where finance and HR can really partner better together is understanding that journey, right? Like, what is the time that it takes to fill an open requisition? And then from the time that new hire starts, how long does it take for them to actually ramp up? And if HRs is having, a business leader say, hey, we need 12 new hires in Q2, it's like, well, actually, do you need them in Q2 or do you need them to start in Q1? Because if you want them to be productive by Q2, you actually need much more of a lead time. And I think when HR and finance start to build that really good relationship, they can better understand the needs of the business and help them think through, actually you need 12 people in Q2, but you really need them here by the end of March for them to be productive in Q2. So understanding like that flow of people. And as Limor said, for SaaS companies, people are the asset. In a lot of SaaS companies, 70, 80% of the cost is driven by people. So I think it's tough to separate people and money. They're very, very interconnected. And I think once you understand that every workforce decision is both a people decision and a monetary decision, that's when I think like the true partnership can really start to kick in.
I totally agree. I would even add another angle. There is the angle of the process flow, like life cycle of an employee in and out. What does it do, by the way, to the cost? Because when you hire new people, it's always, more costly and so forth. And there is another angle, in my view, which is the org design, which I can say that this is something that in HiBob, for example, because we are in this sort of junction from being a company that moves from growth, hyper growth to scale. This is the place where you need to start embed additional thought layers to, again, mainly to leaders and then to all the rest of the organization, of how do you build it right in terms of cost structure. So when it comes to org design, locations of talent, the spread of levels, the more junior versus the senior level, a ratio of roles, like how do you look at the whole value chain, and how do you make sure that you have the right proportions between different, chunks of work, and therefore, the number of individuals that you need to have in each of the jobs. So I think that this part of the org design is also a very crucial, junction where HR and finance really have the opportunity to provide a much more sort of sophisticated way for managers or for leaders to look at how they build it right and healthy. And it's really, I mentioned the cost structure, but again, if you then translate it also to very sort of pure people, human capital aspect, then, if you build teams of one manager to 3 people versus one manager to 10 people, other than the cost, right? Because every manager is sort of a overhead cost. But other than that, you also want to look at the implications of what does it mean in terms of talent development? What is the proper spend for a manager to be able to really, equip people and, the whole life cycle of what he needs to manage when it comes to people management. So, this is where these things connect. You need to say, on the one hand, what do you want? What is the experience that is required? What is the type of, level of expertise that you need to build in the organization? How much time does it take? All of those, which are very, people-related questions, but then how to, again, translate it to the considerations of cost, and how to, to say, okay, so I'm going with that or with that, and build the right mix, I guess.
I've always found that one of the interesting complexities is there's like a missing middle between finance and HR, where, as you're describing, there's all these experiential factors. Sometimes you might say, I want people in Q1, so I budgeted for that, but actually they're not going to be productive until Q2. I think being able to just like articulate, like, here's the messy middle that sometimes is in the machine and sometimes is just in people's heads, I think helps the two sides really understand what they don't know or understand. Are there any particular things that you found yourself either explaining to someone else or having explained to you that allowed you to be like, oh, I get it now. This is why we're frictioning. This is now easy to solve.
I think for companies like HiBob and some of the other startups that I've worked at, that have gone through these phases of hypergrowth, the hiring process and the kind of the rapid development of new teams and new departments has always tripped me up in finance, because in finance we like predictability and we like having numbers that we know about and can trust, and we generally don't like surprises. And I think sometimes in the past, you kind of hear, oh, we're starting a new team. And you're like, nobody told us that in finance. Like, we're kind of the last people to know. And I think that just goes back to what I said about earlier, which is, finance teams tend to be viewed as like the red tape of the organization. And if you find yourself in one of those organizations where you feel like, you're constantly saying no, or the team views you as red tape, you probably won't be included in those conversations. And I think that's where the mindset shift needs to happen for finance folks, where if you're just sitting behind a spreadsheet all day, you're probably not doing your job as well as you can be. I think the spreadsheet should be like the end of the day focus, and the majority of the day should be you're out there meeting your business partners and you're trying to add value, whether that's helping the HR team understand what EBITDA means, or reconciling, data across systems so you have one shared set of truth. But I think, getting out there in front of the business, understanding what's happening, that way you're not, surprised by, the HR team spinning up this new department or this new, whole team that you didn't really know about. So that's kind of my perspective, is be out there early and often with your business partners, because if you don't have good business relationships, then your forecast isn't going to be good.
I think for me, it's almost like everything. A lot goes back to communication and the sort of transparency and communication. I'm thinking, pretty much every practice that I've built, whether it's graduate onboarding practices, okay, for organizations that just starts to, to onboard really chunks of graduates with a very strong rationale of the fact that you want to, build people from the starting of their career, bring in fresh, mind and innovation and helping the cost structure, by the way, right, by starting really career journeys from the beginning. So just that is an example, okay? I think that when I look back at when we introduced in the past company that I worked at, this very holistic practice, if we would have not come at very early stage with the design principles, what do we aim to do? Why, for example, when it comes to graduates, there needs to be like a time-based practice that helps you progress, with your compensation and everything. Because the reality is that, after you have an experience of half a year or a year at a company, then you're already considered an experienced talent, and therefore you're worth more. And if we bring you in and we invest everything, in your onboarding, obviously when it's a graduate and the investment is larger, then what do we also need to invest in order to retain you for the long term and bring this ROI, for bringing you in. So if we would not have done that really together with our finance team, bringing the philosophy first, translating it to what does it mean in terms of practice, and then sort of, giving the budgeting, perspective of it, and then doing the right balances. I don't know, for sure it would, it would find our finance or our CFO or finance partner surprised at some point, and it would be a nightmare, right? So yeah, I really think a lot is about, really communication, transparency, and co-design.
What I really love about that example is you were sort of advocating for the employee's financial dynamic and sort of making clear to finance, like, if you cut them a bad deal, you're going to end up being hurt on the back end. And so, like, why don't you just think bigger than this one quarter? And like that became a win-win for everybody.
I had the same thought, and I was going to ask, like, did you receive any pushback either in this example or in others at other workplaces where you made your case and you didn't have the data lined up already to make your case to the board or to the executive decision makers? And how did you, like, what was that process like? How did you identify the data points that would help you build your case? And did you later on, as a more experienced professional, say, I'm coming to the table first with those specific data points? And what were they?
So first, it is really a career journey. Like, you can't know it all from the beginning, right? It's really about, experiencing different, type of situations and getting the hit many times, for either not coming on time or not explaining the whole story or not coming with all the data points that are needed to make the right decisions. I remember again from those early stages when I did come with my story, but my story again did not meet the needs of a CFO that is looking at certain data points and, certain stuff in order to make their decision. And so I really remember those experiences where we used to laugh about it, that we were called to run across the circle for like 10 times because we came once with a story, and then we were missing this and that and that, and then we came again, and then there were other aspects that were missing. I think it's really about, again, learning those languages, okay, and thinking about, for example, currencies. What does it mean? Taking into account, that in locations, specific locations, currency fluctuation is very high. So, do you want to really go ahead and start to hire people there, or not? Because we from HR are thinking about employment regulations, right? We less think about those type of things that are about the financial. So it's really adding more and more depth into understanding this holisticness of how you look at it's talent, and what is this impact on budget, and which is accumulated. It's not something that you do right in the first time, I think.
Yeah, as it relates to finance and HR, in the past, there's been times where, you have a forecast and you go to present it to the board and you kind of miss the forecast, you're over budget. And then when they double click to see why you're over budget, usually those costs are related to people, right? Maybe you blew out your travel budget, or maybe your salaries is higher than you expected. And I think the way that manifests in a good HR and finance relationship is kind of this 4-letter word at some companies called it policies. I think when HR does a really good job setting policies, it kind of removes some of the surprises from the financial forecast. So whether that's, when you're flying, you can't book a business seat unless it's over, an 8-hour flight, things like that, that still empower the employee, but keep the right, guidelines for the finance team to not miss the forecast. I think really good HR teams build policies that protect finance, but also empower the employees to feel like they can make the right decision for the business.
I feel like HR and finance are really unified in this awkward role of protecting the organization from unconsidered ambition, where someone's like, I'm just going to do this. It's super smart. It's great. You're like, wait a second. That actually has all these secondary costs. And what does it do here? And like, it's not a fun role half the time, because it's like, oh, but I had this exciting idea and now you're telling me I can't do it. And it's like, I'm not telling you can't do it. I'm just telling you there are consequences and you need to know what those are and own them. And I feel like when HR and finance are really at their best, people feel empowered by like those policies you're describing. Like, I know what to do and I can do it well. It's sort of when they're being created as you go along that you get the most friction.
Definitely agree with that.
Yeah, I think that like many other aspects that I see, it's also about the buy-in at the top and making sure that you have the back sort of the top down directive. So you put the guard rails, right, and you are a lot of times in the governance hat, as you said, Kenneth. I think that our job, or the success of our job, is really first to build the confidence in the top management layer of why we need to do this or that, and why, and because the always the pace that you need to work in our context, right? Again, software, SaaS, tech companies, everything is like, on fire all the time. And now you need to grow from today to tomorrow, you need to add 30 people. Okay, how do I do it? So I think that, it's really about coming as much as possible with a unified voice that you bring together from the starting point. You do the buy-in from the top. You explain the considerations. You explain the constraints. You come up with a whole story. You do it together, finance and HR together. And then it's much easier, obviously, to cascade these downstream. So for me, the whole buy-in and the top-down directive is also a key component. And again, to successfully do that, if you come together with a shared story, it's much easier than I'm coming and explaining something, and then Joe comes, from the financial head and explains something, but it doesn't really talk together. So then it breaks, and we didn't do the buy-in right.
There are times I feel like the line between HR and finance is somewhat artificial. Like it exists because we need to give people titles and distribute work tasks, but at the end of the day, it's really all one big thought process around all the things that you're talking about. And so, like, starting off with that we want to make a move. That move requires the joint presentation of HR and finance, as opposed to we go talk to each of you separately, and then you get all these weird frictions. Seems to really be where this is at. It's living within this artificial departmental structure that doesn't actually match how strategy gets assembled.
Well said.
Yeah. There is one of the concepts that I've been talking about in the recent years when it comes to the HR or the operating model, but I think it's true across. It's a boundaryless HR. So the notion that, and really, I think it's true across. It cannot work anymore, with the complexity, the complex environment that we are working in, and and AI, and all those stuff that are really like exponential. I think that if you continue to work in silos and you don't do good enough work at becoming boundaryless, then it's just it will really slow you down, because you need to keep going back to things because they are not nailed down, because you didn't think about it together, because you didn't really close the loop. So for me, this concept of really embedded HR in the business together with finance, not, caring about those old chart, lines, rather than really looking at it from processes perspectives or, value chain or the impact that you want to make. I'm, for example, when we build now the 2026 plans for the people and culture team, from the beginning of the thought process, I already met Dina, our FP&A lead in HiBob, to discuss with her, to brainstorm, to say, this is what we want to drive. How can we do some of this stuff together? What can you? Sometimes it's also about making sure that both sides have the budgets for it, right? Because if I want to start some initiative that I assume that I need the FP&A to be involved, then they need to know that in advance in order to take that also into account in their budgets and capacity planning. So, you need to start really in the planning stage together. Going back to, to what you said, Joe, about surprises. So it's surprises also in terms of where you need to jump in, right? And where you also need to be part of something. If we don't plan it together, then it will be much more difficult to do it as we go.
So I'm walking away from this conversation with a couple things that I will tell people I'm advising to really think about. Like, if you are in HR and you want to talk to finance, think about schedules, think about predictability. How can you make it easier for them to say where the money is going to be tomorrow, and where in your process is there ambiguity that you can clean up? Whereas if we're talking to finance, it's a lot more of like, you look at this world through a neat, abstract equation. There's actually a lot of messy things that are happening within those sets of assumptions that can be quantified, but you need to know you need to quantify them. And HR lives in that space, and making that real for them so that they don't feel surprised, but instead are like, oh yeah, I have to account for this variable that normally I don't think about, feels like some really solid relationship builders for people in this space.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, I was just going to say that there seems to be this narrative out in the world where it's like HR versus finance. And in this conversation, it's pretty encouraging to see that it's quite simple, or it's actually doable to just start on good footing and solid footing by reaching out and communicating effectively. And that starts with setting the stage by saying, hey, these are the plans. Let's get our communication in order. What do we mean when we say X, Y, and Z? And starting from that point before there's even a chance for the friction to begin. Because I think a lot of people out there listening are going to say, oh, it sounds like a fairy tale. It's a dream. I wish I had that situation at work. And I just, when I just call or approach the HR or finance colleague, it's like, oh no, here they come. And it's really about shifting the mindset and reaching out a hand across the aisle and understanding that there shouldn't be an aisle. We're all one. We're all one organization with the same goals, and it starts with a handshake and communication, and then you can start and to build one path from there. Did either of you ever find this friction in your careers? Was it unbearable? How did you get over it? Did you automatically know, hey, it's about communication, or did you have a journey to figure that out before you arrived at where you are now?
I would say it's definitely been a journey. When I first started my career and I was more like, behind the spreadsheet 24 hours a day, I kind of felt like, my boss was the CFO. And if I was doing everything to make my CFO happy, I was doing a good job. In finance, that's actually the wrong mindset. I think you have to shift your mindset. It's like your business partners are your boss. And if you're doing right by them and you're doing right by your CFO, that's when you're doing a good job. And there was times where, things would happen that would blow up the forecast because you weren't out with the business understanding, that messy part that Ken was referring to of, like we have this great plan, but everybody has a great plan until they get punched in the face. And that's when you need to kind of adapt the plan. And I kind of changed that in my career by spending like one day a week just sitting in other parts of the office. So now I'm a remote employee. I can't do that as much, but one day with, the go-to-market team, one day with the internal operations team, just to like be a fly on the wall and hear, some of the things that otherwise I wouldn't have heard. That goes like a really long way to shift. Okay, cool. I'm working in the spreadsheet all day, but there's actually business things that are happening that are inputs to that spreadsheet. And if you don't have that, it's really tough to be good at finance.
I want to call out something that is more looking ahead and less reflective on the past. And we can't obviously go off a call without talking about AI, right? These days, so I wanna talk for a minute about AI and the opportunity that I see uh, in this transformation and storm that we are part of. Um, as an opportunity again for HR and finance to really reinvent how to work together. Because really the whole aspect of planning is taking a whole twist, right? Because we need to start thinking about how does it look to plan, to do headcount planning, to do financial planning in the world of agent and the human working together, right? It's like it's a new field. No one did it before, and we need to really invent it together. And we cannot do it alone, each of us. You know, at the end of the day, it must be something that is built together from scratch. How do we provide the foundation of understanding, you know, what is the work being done by agents and versus the work being done by humans, and obviously all the you know the motion, because it's not a snapshot, it's something that will change over time. So how do you plan around that? And so for me, and this is on my table currently, together with our FP&A, is really the journey of how do we invent that? How do we come to 2027 with a different way to show headcount planning to our CEO? So I want to maybe, sort of finish with this big opportunity for finance and HR to reinvent together.
It's an incredible last statement for the end of this episode. We've been looking back to learn from our experience, and now we're on the brink of a brand new era where everything needs to be from scratch and everybody's learning. So it's a really great vision into the future, and it's really a great opportunity to be creative, to bridge gaps, destroy gaps, and just come together. I want to thank both of you so much for joining us for this episode. It's been really a learning experience for me because finance is definitely not my area of expertise. So I was genuinely asking questions because I wanted to know the answers. So thank you both so much. And Ken, as always.
It's always fun doing these talks with you, Tali. We learn so much.
Every time, yeah. Actually, everybody. Every single time, I learn so much from everyone on this show and in real life if I get the opportunity. So, thanks everybody for listening.
Thank you for having us.
You're welcome. Let's see what the future brings. There's next season, so to be continued.
Thanks for having us on.
Thank you for joining. Have a great rest of the day, and thanks for listening or watching wherever you are.